Morning.
Great. Well, for today, what I'm going to talk about is brand. So, a little bit of context on who I am. I know Allison gave me a little bit of an introduction, so you have some context into where I'm coming from. So, as she mentioned, I work at Esri currently, but I have about 16 years of experience in the area of marketing specifically. I would say that the steel thread throughout my career has been championing purpose-driven brands. That's something that I very much enjoy about my position currently, but is very true to who I am as a person. I think that the work that we do needs to matter. I think that when you leave work at the end of the day and you go home feeling good about what you're putting out in the world is key to happiness. So I consider that a part of my brand. And brand is relatively new to me in the context of my career. I've been working in it about 3 years. So coming out of my MBA at University of Redlands, I stepped into a role covering brand, whereas previously I was focused more on demand marketing, more on ABM, which is account-based marketing, focused really on like that transactional sale, pushing a product. And learning the world of brand was so eye-opening for me. I actually went on to study brand strategy at Harvard. There's an extension program there, and that was a really eye-opening experience as well, where I learned some of the deep practices. And while, I think it would take up probably an entire semester course to go through all of the details of brand, my hope for today and for our hour together is I have three things that I'd love for you to walk away with. So the first one is I'd love for you to have a deeper understanding of what brand is. I think oftentimes the conversation stays at a superficial level of logos and colors and tagline, but branding is so much more than that. And so I'll dive into it and make it a little more real and give a deeper understanding of what that means. The second thing is I want to showcase why brand is more important now than ever before. I think that there's a crucial element to what could probably lovingly be called chaos in the world right now. There's just a lot of uncertainty. There is a new sense of challenge when looking for roles, competition, AI. There are many factors that people leaving their undergraduate degree and stepping into a role, or even having been in a role and looking to grow, are faced with that haven't existed in the past. And I think that brand can actually help you address some of those. And then the last thing that we'll cover today is just practical tips. I think that if branding is completely new to you, if this is not something that you've spent time thinking about, or you've done quite a few reps, this is something you have spent a lot of time thinking about, regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, I want you to walk away with some tips that you can take action on today that will drive you to think a little bit deeper about your own personal brand, to be able to better articulate what you stand for and focus in on what matters most to you. So that's a pretty full agenda, but I think we can do it. I do want to say, like Allison mentioned, have your chats open. Please, let's make this engaging. I'm going to have a couple prompts where I'm going to ask you questions, and I'd love for you to put things in the chat. So this isn't just a one-way lecture of me to you. Let's make it a two-way dialogue. We will have time for Q&A at the end as well. So if you have questions that pop up into your mind, feel free to put them into the chat. We'll address them at the end, and I'll take them in the order that Allison sees them through the chat. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about what is brand. So like I mentioned, I think a lot of people stop at that superficial level, the visual brand, things that are easy for us to identify when we come across a new organization or a person. What do they look like? What colors? What logo? What's their title? Those are all things that provide inputs, are a part of our brand, help us communicate parts of our brand, but they're not our brand. Our brand is something so much deeper and so much bigger than that. It's this expression of who we are, what we stand for, and the way that we make people feel. if you go onto Google and you look up what does brand mean, you're going to end up with probably 15 different definitions. So I'm not going to say that I have the best definition in the world, but I do have one that I have used for years and that I really like. And that is brand is a promise fulfilled. And if you just stop on that for a moment, you're making a promise to the other person in the room. When you enter that room, you're going to show up in a certain way consistently. You're going to offer this value to conversations. You're going to stand up for certain things. You're going to try to drive towards certain things. And you're going to focus on certain things because that is what you stand for. And they can expect that in every interaction, in every touch point throughout. Now, that level of consistency is really, really hard to get to. And that's why it's crucial that we write down what that is, memorialize it, put kind of the nebulous thoughts that we have inside of our brain on paper and work it out and see, does that still resonate when I write it out? When I write my brand story, when I personify myself and say, okay, my brand is this, does that still ring true? What is your archetype? Like, how are you showing up in a conversation? Is it more of that jovial, happy-go-lucky kind of feel, or is it more of a sage, wise sense? If you're showing up in both ways, well, yes, there's a spectrum. That inconsistency is going to start to eat away on how people expect you to show up. They're not going to know what to expect. You're going to surprise them in every interaction and potentially not in a good way. So this is where it's so important to have this articulation and be able to share it with others. And then balance against that. Whenever you take an action, does this ring true with my brand? And while brand itself is not something tangible, I can't pick it up and throw it at you, it does have an impact, a real physical impact. Organizations that don't pay attention to their brand can end up financially hurting themselves. We've seen this most recently with some of the cases like Target. I'm sure many of us have heard about Target in the news recently. People are boycotting them because of their rollback of DEI practices. And we're seeing this across many different organizations around the world. There was a great example of Zara a couple of years ago had this marketing campaign that seemed completely tone deaf to what was happening in the global environment, and their customers had this massive emotional response to this marketing campaign. And then when they went to reply and apologize, saying, oh, well, you shouldn't have interpreted it that way, then that ended up with another backlash of, oh, don't say this is us and not you. Like, take responsibility for this as well. So every output that you have, every story that you tell, it's important to tie that back to your values and what your audience expects of you. And that's true both on the organization side and on the personal side as well. There's one example that really stuck with me when I was going through the marketing strategy course at Harvard that I think speaks to the way that perception can shape reality. So it's this story about a test that was being conducted at a university. I think it was Caltech and Stanford, I believe. So back in 2008, they had a bunch of people come in. I think it was about 20 adults. They laid in this MRI scanner, probably multiple MRI scanners, let's be real. But what they wanted to do was monitor their brain and how it reacted to different wines. I felt like this was also an appropriate story given Allison's and my background going to Italy, consulting a winery, but so they wanted to see if we had someone drink a $2 bottle of wine, how did their brain react? And how would their brain react if they drank an expensive bottle of wine? So they had a few different tiers of premium wine that they went through. And with each sip, they would watch the brain activity on the monitor and they would tell the person what they were drinking. Well, they noticed that as they went up the tiers, they saw an increase in brain activity, in particularly the pleasure center of the brain. People were reacting more strongly, enjoying this wine more. The self-reported taste ratings were growing throughout as well. All that to find out it was the same wine at the end of the day. And I think that that showcases the power of storytelling. We can actually shape how we perceive things down to the molecular level, the way that our brain actually perceives something because of the stories that we're told. And that is extremely powerful when you're crafting your own story. When you're figuring out how you want people to perceive you, because that ultimately translates into reality. So we're going to do an exercise. Pull up your chats if they're not already open. We're going to talk about your favorite brands. So throw them out there. I can't see the chat, so Allison, hopefully you can call out some of the ones that we're seeing come through. But just look around you, maybe a t-shirt that you're wearing, the computer that you're using, the cell phone that you have, maybe a brand that you follow on social media that you really enjoy.
They're coming in. I've
Okay,
got
what are you seeing?
Costco, Nike, Ann Taylor, Nike, Yeti, Under Armour, Nike,
Nike's one we get often.
Lenovo.
Mm.
I'm Gen X, so I appreciate zero brands. Apple. Anyone else?
This is great.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I would say Nike is one that we see often, which is actually funny if you look back at their history, because there was an outcry that happened a while back on some of their labor practices, and their consumers demanded a change, which they responded to, and they continue to invest very, very heavily in their brand marketing. But anytime you think of any of these brands that we just talked about, Nike, Apple, Costco, some of the others that I've heard when I've done sessions like this in the past are Disney, Netflix, Lego. I know Apple is one that you already mentioned. Red Bull is one, Vans, Dove, Wendy's, IKEA, Duolingo. Like there are many different brands that might come to mind where you feel drawn to them, where you like sort of the persona that they've built. However, if you think about these brands and you take, let's say, for instance, the way that Wendy's shows up on LinkedIn versus the way that National Geographic shows up on LinkedIn, would you expect them to respond to posts in the same way? Would they use the same language? Would they use the same tones? For those that aren't familiar with Wendy's, they're actually very well known in the marketing space for having very quippy, sometimes borderline rude responses. I think they just recently got in trouble with the whole space launch and some of their comments, but that's something that you see as distinct differences in these kind of brand voices. And people follow them for a reason. They want to see those responses. But what you don't want to see is the person that you're following suddenly change their voice, suddenly respond in a different way, suddenly show up in a way that you're not expecting, because that usually creates a negative response in your audience. So now let's take this to the more human level. Let's think about some of your favorite human brands. Some people that you follow. These could be celebrities, musicians, actors, TikTok stars.
Oh, one more that came in through the previous one was Tuft and Paw. Couldn't
Often.
find the name, but the branding is stunning, and that was from Kelsey.
Ooh,
We have Mel Robbins, Paul Stanley, not
okay.
Paul Stanley from Kiss. Is that? Yeah. All right. Natalie wins.
Yeah, right.
Simon Sinek, Luka Doncic of the Lakers, Huberman, Taylor Swift. Got some Swifties here.
Say, no Swifties in the audience? Come on.
I know. Anyone else?
No, this is great. Um,
Rihanna. We got a
Hey,
Rihanna.
Rihanna, it was funny. I almost included a slide of some of Fenty's posts on Instagram because they do an amazing job of consistent branding. But then I was like, copyright law, maybe we don't take screenshots of other people's brands. So I ended up cutting it out of today's presentation. But I think that that's a great example, both of a brand and of a person being very true to who they are. So you see kind of the wide range of individuals that we resonate with as well. And I think that it's important to hammer on that point of consistency again. Like one of the maybe challenges or responses that I get when talking about personal branding often is, well, I don't want to label myself. I don't want to put myself into a box and say that this is who I am and I'm just so much more than that. I have different facets to my personality. And it's like, yeah, totally. We all do. That's awesome. There's a spectrum of emotion and adjectives that we would use to describe ourselves. Um, no matter who you are, but those spectrums do stay within a range for different individuals. And it's asking yourself, how do you want to be perceived most of the time? How do you show up most of the time authentically? It's important to note that let's take Jane Goodall, for example. She's known as a very serious individual, helping the planet. She still has a sense of humor. She can still show that side of her personality, but she does it in a very specific way, a way that is her, that is consistently her. And so, what does that mean for you? And again, it comes back to intentionality. So, there's an exercise here that I think will be kind of fun in practice. There's a ton of different adjectives here, and I'm realizing professional moved the L around, so unfortunately, we'll just have to live with that. But I think that there's beauty in forcing yourself to only select a few adjectives. One of my favorite quotes, though I don't remember who exactly said it, I apologize, is it's about focus, not exclusion. And I think that that's crucial because just because you select three or four adjectives on this list, it doesn't mean that the others don't also have value for you. We're just saying that these are the ones that we're going to double down on. These are the three that we want to be known for. So I'm curious to hear from the audience. Is there a word or a couple words from this list that are calling out to you? Something that currently shows up in your daily actions?
Do you want in the chat? Okay, we got playful,
Ooh, okay.
friendly, sustainable,
Ooh.
friendly, responsible, creative. Mine's not up there because mine would be monstrous and things like that. So, we have friendly, bold,
Bold. Ooh, I love it.
approachable,
Very nice. Okay, well,
informative. There you go.
okay. Well, what if we randomly select a few? And I'm just gonna randomly pick out four. What I'm gonna do is I want to ask you, think about all of the people that you've encountered throughout your life. This could be someone you've worked with on a group project. This could be a colleague, a family member. When you think serious, reliable, informative, direct, is there someone that comes to mind for you first, ahead of all others? And you don't have to put it in the chat. I just want to take a moment and let you think about that. And then I want to look at what if we change the list of words? So now we're looking at negative words instead of positive words. And my point in doing this is to illustrate that while sometimes it can feel safer to just not take action, to not force a choice, to just opt out of labeling ourselves, even inaction has a cost. So choosing to opt out of branding doesn't mean you avoid being branded. It just means that you're giving up your power to shape it. So people will form their own interpretations based on their experiences with you, and chances are there's already a narrative circulating amongst those you've worked with. And right now, if you just take stock, would you think that if you asked 15 people across different aspects of your life, that they would all select the same words to describe you? And if they did, would they be the words that you want them to pick? And I am not saying that by going through an exercise by personal branding, you won't still get different interpretations of who you are. We all show up in different ways with different people in different context. So that's going to happen regardless. But this allows you to take more control. This allows you to have the opportunity to choose what you want to be known for and then use frameworks and processes to show up consistently in that way. Because, like what we said, consistency builds perception, and perception creates reality. So, why does any of this matter? I think that it's really important when you look at the external environment, when you look at the competition. One of the quotes that I pulled here from these news article clippings was nearly 3 in 5 people worldwide plan to look for a job in 2025. Like, how do you stand out in a market like that? I mean, as someone who personally interviews people quite often for roles, I know that myself, I've had trouble looking at resume after resume after resume that are just packed with all these buzzwords trying to beat the algorithm. Um, and there have been a few people that really stand out when I have a chance to interview them, when I read their cover letters. And a commonality that I see in them is that they've spent time reflecting on how they want to show up. They are able to articulate the lenses through which they make decisions. They come across as confident, humble and thoughtful. They're able to articulate what they stood for and their unique differentiators. I think all of this is helpful when you're looking at a massive sea of people. How do you stand out? And how do you do so authentically? This is one of my favorite quotes, and it's people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that's the crux of what we're trying to get to with our own personal brands is how do we want people to feel when we walk in a room, when we walk away from an interaction? How do we want to show up in our best way? And some of the ways that we can do this, and one of my favorite ways, is to go through a little bit of an exercise where you are now the brand manager for You Inc. And that could be whatever your name is, Laura Krenek Inc. Incorporated. This is now my company. This is my brand that I am in charge of managing. And sometimes by just separating yourself from, Laura Krenek the person to Laura Krenek the brand can help you just get a little bit of distance to see how others might perceive you when you show up. To be able to put into words some of the factors that tie into your identity and how you want to be known and your target audience. And you can use some of these same practices that organizations have been using for years, but apply it to the human being. So I always recommend, take some time, put your thoughts on paper, make sure that this is a list you can come back to. It doesn't matter if you start with the Notes app on your phone. That's where I started. I put, Laura's brand guidelines. And each time I would encounter a challenge and I got a little clearer on who I was and how I wanted to show up, I would just make a little note. That's where you can start. And you can scale this all the way up to having formal brand guidelines for yourself that you bring into interactions, that you share with others when you want to action against things so that you can clearly articulate to them how you're going to show up in a situation. I know sometimes when I talk about this in regards to really getting to the crux of what the value you bring to a situation is, one thing that pops up often is this battling of imposter syndrome. I think especially if we're early on in our careers, if we're in a room where there aren't a lot of people like us, we can start to feel like we don't belong in that room. But something that I learned actually going through, and this seems completely left field, but going through my yoga teacher training. So I, as of June, will actually be a certified yoga teacher. And one of the questions that came up when I was going through that was actually from another student. And she said, I haven't been practicing yoga that long, and I feel like I shouldn't teach things that I myself can't do. And the teacher said, but it's not about you in the class that you're teaching. You're guiding them through something. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. There's always going to be someone in the world that knows more than you. All you have to do is know a little bit more than someone in order to guide them through, to help them follow, and for them to have a really good experience. And you yourself bring a unique perspective. We all have different experiences, different lives, things that we've gone through. We can offer a unique perspective based off of those experiences. So, whatever room you might be coming into, even if you're not the one with the most information or knowledge, which if you are, I would, say the old adage, go into another room if you're the smartest one in the room. But by understanding your history, your experiences, the lenses at which you look through things, then you can be clearer about the value that you're bringing. Even if you feel like you don't have the most to offer, you do. So, what does this look like in practice when you're starting to build out your brand? I tried to whittle this down into about 5 steps just to make it really approachable. I'm going to go through each of these in order and in a little bit more detail. I'll give you some very practical tips for each one. And I know that in 2025, we can't go a day without talking about AI. I will give you a couple AI recommendations too that I use myself. I think with any new technology, there are often mixed emotions when you talk about something like AI. Some are very excited, some are more apprehensive. For me, I'm on the side of the fence where I don't think that AI is going to take over the world. Don't quote me on that in 5 years. I might change my mind. I refrain or I retain the right to do so. But I do think that individuals who are able to leverage AI as part of their work will end up having a competitive advantage over those who don't. So that is something that I think will be valuable, not only in this practice, but just overall in your career, knowing how to use this to help guide some of your decisions. And I will caveat that because I am on a University of Redlands webcast, please do not use it for any of your papers. We are not plagiarizing here. We're not having ChatGPT write any of our stuff. We're using it to help challenge our perceptions, to ask questions, get some clarity, make things real. So please use it in that way, use it responsibly. So the steps that I've outlined here are research. You know, you don't know what you don't know. So look out, figure out who you admire, figure out who's doing what you want to do really well. Um, Figure out who's where you are now and who's where you aspire to be. As you go through this research, you'll start to see some patterns and trends emerge. List out your identity. List out your core values, some of your strengths, what you stand for, your history, your experiences. Consistency is the third one. I think I've hammered that one quite a few times already, but make sure that you can show up consistently. And that kind of goes into the next one as well of engagement. I find that oftentimes people end up biting off more than they can chew. They say, okay, I'm all in. We're going to do this across every platform. I'm going to consistently show up in Instagram and LinkedIn, and I'm going to reach out and do all these speaking engagements and here at work. And all of a sudden, 2 months into it, something happens in their life and they're not able to keep up that consistency. So figure out where is the largest concentration of the audience that you want to engage with and show up there and show up there well. As you do that, then you can continue to grow as your bandwidth allows. And then the last one is, you know, I may have listed this out in a linear way, but it's not linear. It's a circle. And it probably would have been more beneficial for me to put it in that way because as you go through this process, you're constantly going to need to reflect and refine. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but we want to avoid massive rebrands. That's again going back to that consistency point. If you're constantly rebranding who you are, people aren't going to know who you are. But if you make slight refinements as you make new discoveries, as you have new aha moments, then that just becomes a part of your story, a part of your narrative, and you start to finesse and get closer to who you want to be. So as I go through each of these 5 points, I'm going to give, I tried to whittle it down to about 3 recommendations each. So for the first one, research, I recommend going in to LinkedIn, to Instagram accounts, looking up some of your favorite people, and actually seeing if they have a personal website or speaker bios. That can look like going on to Google and either looking up, their name plus personal website or their name plus speaker bio, and take some screenshots. Figure out what resonates with their style, with their tone. That can help you start to identify how you feel after looking at them and how you want your audience to feel when they walk away. A little AI tip here too is you can actually take some screenshots and use AI to say, describe the tone of this individual, describe what their mission might be. What are you taking away from this? And you might actually start to see some patterns and trends that AI can recognize, and it puts it into terminology that you can then leverage when you're articulating out your own brand. I do have some additional AI prompts here that I would recommend. One is actually one I can't take credit for. Scott Galloway, who is a very famous marketing professor at NYU. He also does his own brand program. He talked about this approach of personifying your brand through picking 2 people, so person A and person B. And these can be famous people that are just easy for you to bring to mind of how would they react to something. And I put this little image of these little wooden blocks. I'm not sure if you played with them as a child like I did, but you can have a clown face and a policeman body and something else. So if you're taking elements of people, because you are still your own unique person, what elements are you seeing? And then you can say, describe that person. What would that person look like? How would they show up in a room? What would their qualities be? If you were to write a mission statement for them, what would that look like? You can start to go down like this path of description and start to see what rings true. And if it feels like it's way off, pick a different person. Say, okay, well, instead of that, let's pick this person and this person. And that'll just help you get more clarity because as you see it written out, it'll start to crystallize in your mind. The second thing is having it ask you probing questions. Give me 10 reflective questions to define my personal brand. This will just create that sort of thought-provoking process to get you thinking deeper. And then the third one would be describe a perfect day. I think of this kind of like manifesting your future. You're making it real. If what your ideal job is or what your interests or your goals or your values are, start to list those out and say, describe a perfect day when I am 50 and at this part of my career, when I'm 80 and I've retired, what does that look like? What am I reflecting on? I've done that numerous times over the last couple of years, and there's something sort of magical about it no longer feeling like an aspiration, but feeling like it already happened. That helps you as you start to work towards that goal. It makes it feel more real and it makes it feel more achievable. So AI is probably a rabbit hole we could go down, but these are some of my most used prompts that I think kind of help you on the research phase of things. I'd be curious if you've tried any others. Please feel free to enter them into the chat if you have. And the last one for this stage of the process is building a phrase bank. This is actually a recommendation I got from someone else, and it's noting down recurring words, phrases, themes that really align. When you're watching someone speak and you're like, yes, that's exactly how I feel, write it down. What was the combination of words that they used that you resonated with? And I'm certainly not saying plagiarize, but you can weave that into your own narrative. You can start to say, okay, I like how this combination, this topic, like really leaning into that feels authentic to me. That can really help you as you start to work through your own articulation. Okay, so going into your identity. One of the recommendations that I got throughout my career was actually going back in history, going through your life story, listing out core memories all the way from your childhood to today. looking at both the good and the bad, because those shaped you in different ways, asking you why it stuck with you, how it shapes the way that you make decisions today, how it shapes your perspective, how it shapes your values. Those are things that are part of you. I like to say often that when you get hired, you're not just hiring, work Laura, you're hiring all of Laura. You're hiring all of the experiences I've had, both in my career, in education, and in my personal experiences and relationships that I've had throughout the years. That shapes who you are in the future. And I think lends itself to that unique factor that you bring in. So just kind of writing on a piece of paper and starting to highlight some of those things will help you crystallize again what it is that is unique to you. Clarify your core values. This is something where you can just start with a value sheet. Again, you could use ChatGPT, just give me a list of 100 values, and then highlight like 3 to 5 of them. When you do that, make sure you also go through the practice of testing them. Have I defended this value even when it was difficult? Is it not just aspirational, but something that's integral to me? Because that might challenge your perception too of, is this something that is already there or that I want to get to? Um, and it's not a wrong answer wherever you land. It's just a different approach and different processes that you'll have to put in place depending on where you land with that answer. And then define your differentiator. So focus on things in your life that feel effortless to you, but are very valuable to others. And this is where I think peer feedback is really, really valuable. Asking people, what do you rely on me for? This can help elevate where you naturally add impact when you enter a room. Sometimes it's hard for us to see that ourselves. But overall, I think that it's really important to start these conversations and see what patterns start to emerge as you talk to multiple people. Okay, consistency. So here, I want to focus on really aligning your messaging and your action. You've taken some time, you've written things out. Now it's time to check in. Are you actually aligning the action that you're doing each week with the messaging that you've put together, with this sort of brand that you're creating for yourself? Where are some areas for improvement? You're not going to get it 100% the first time you do it. It takes so many reps. There's someone I worked with said, you can't get away from the reps, whether it's exercise, work, education. You have to keep showing up. You have to keep practicing. No one is going to show up and start playing Mozart their first day of piano lessons. The same is true with identifying your brand. Keep showing up, keep figuring it out, test and learn. Address potential threats early on. So this is something that for an organization we would consider crisis management or having like a crisis management plan before the crisis happens. That's something that is important to just have in your back pocket. If you are becoming very, very clear on what your brand is, it's also important to reflect back on anything in your past that could surface and contradict your brand. Sometimes it's important to just own your story and proactively weave that in. Any challenges or missteps that have happened in the past. I had a great conversation with someone, a former colleague, that talked about how she shows up in her own profession and how that wasn't always the case. There was a period of time in life that was really hard for her, that she wasn't showing up in the way that she wanted, but she learned from that and she turned it around. It created this authenticity and this resilience in her story that you can't fake. So it's okay if we're not 100% perfect all the time, but own it before it just comes up and ends up breaking that trust that audiences might have. I think this often comes up in politics too when they're doing campaigns. Do you bring it out of the closet now, or do you just wait for it to pop up eventually? So it's something to consider. And then building systems. So aim for a set number of meaningful interactions that you want to work towards. Make sure that you're working towards this visibility, towards these relationships, track your progress and engagement. Again, this can be as simple as just a notes app on your phone. This is where I started. The one platform that I decided to lean in on was LinkedIn. I decided that was where I could show up authentically and consistently. And I was just looking at, okay, where am I? You know, where are my engagements? What am I seeing as far as like conversions? And by that I mean like how many impressions did you see and how many people engaged? Is this something that people are interacting with? And where am I seeing more interaction? So those are some great ways to just get a pulse on how things are performing. Okay, engage. And that kind of speaks to what I just mentioned. Pick a platform, do it well, research the top 1% of people who are doing it really, really well, and make sure that as you're looking at their approaches, you still filter that through your own brand guidelines. Sure, that person is showing up really well, they're getting a ton of engagement, but if they're using practices that don't align with the guidelines you've just outlined for yourself, go find a better role model. Um, Make sure that you have that consistency so that your audience knows when to expect insights from you. As you show up time and time again, that'll build familiarity. And as people are more familiar with you, they'll engage more, and overall, it increases affinity as well. Okay, last step of the process, reflect and refine. You know, I think we've touched on this a bit already, but as part of those regular check-ins, just make sure that you pause, you make sure that your brand is still aligned to who you are. You're not letting it get swept up in just where people are engaging, but that it still feels like it's a good representation of you. Has anything changed in regards to your goals, your values, your audience? I think that as you progress through this process, it's easier to just sharpen your guidelines, make it easier for others to get you at a glance. Um, and by just starting, not waiting until everything is perfect, that will keep you from falling into analysis paralysis as well. Like, okay, I have all these steps, I have all these things that I should do. I can't launch my brand yet. It's okay. Like, you don't have to be perfect on the first day. Just start, work at it, get better with time. And then make sure that you're seeking out guidance and feedback. Don't do it in a silo. Make sure that you're asking trusted peers, mentors, people whose opinions you respect, who have your best interest in mind. You know, you can ask them questions like, when you think of me, what are 3 words that come to mind? How would you describe my strengths to someone else? What do you think is the biggest misconception people have of me? Those are some great things to ask to get insights about how you might be perceived that you don't know. Okay, we talked about a lot. If you walk away with nothing else, brand is an asset. Make sure you use it. Consistency is more important than all the flashy bells and whistles. Make sure that you're seeking out lots and lots and lots of feedback, and then just continue to articulate and refine over time. So with that, I will go ahead and pause and open it up to any questions we might have.
Thank you so much, Laura. And while people are thinking of questions, uh, I recommend everybody connect with Laura on LinkedIn. She has some obviously great content and a great personal brand, but she also, and she also really just shares some amazing information across her industry. So thank you for that. Also, Laura, I'm not sure if it's possible, but um, to gain access to some of the content on these slides,
Yeah, of course.
is
I'd be
that
happy to
okay?
share. Yeah, I'll share a version of the slides after this. I can share it with you, Allison, if it's possible.
Okay. And then everybody else, you can, here, there's my email in the chat. And here's my cell because a lot of times there's typos in my email that come through. So if you can't reach me, that's how you go, and I can get these slides over to you. Here's one from Kayleen. Lots of thanks, by the way. There's just an endless series of thank yous. But what is a suggestion for damage control of your brand?
It's a great question. I think that goes into that sort of crisis management approach. So if it's something that's already happened, I think that goes back to what I was mentioning in regards to owning your story. Recognize how that plays into who you are today. If it's something that happens in the future, then it's understanding while you can look at it in a rational way. So you want to be able to take stock of Who are the people that you can rely on? What resources do you have at hand? Who are the people that can be trusted advisors in a moment where you might be freaking out because of all of the potential consequences that you're facing? It's good to just outline a sort of guideline for yourself before you find yourself in that stressful situation, so you have something to fall back on, bringing you back into that rational thought. Beyond that, too, I think that it's important to note it's a moment in time. It will pass. Yes, it might take some work to recover from it. Whatever it might be. It might be a small blip, like maybe someone posted on your social media something that you didn't like, put a comment that you didn't like. I would always say don't engage, because the way that the algorithms work, the more that you engage, the more that that just puts fuel behind that negativity. So that's always an option. If it's something bigger, I mean, just look across the industry and beyond, and you'll see there are many people that have recovered from some crazy things. So it's a moment in time. Uh, there are ways to build and regain that trust after the fact as well. Hopefully that answers your question.
Great. I don't see another question here, and I know a lot of people are running out of time for lunch and stuff, but I want to let everyone know that first of all, don't we do this? Laura, thank you. Absolutely, absolutely amazing. And I do want to say that if there's a lot of new faces here in the writing lounge, so I thank you for Laura. I thank Laura again for bringing a whole bunch of new people in here. But we do have these every month, and we have resume refreshes, we have cover letter writing, we have elevator pitches, all sorts of professional career development topics as well. And I will, for those of you who are Redlands folks here, I'm going to embarrass you, Jim. Jim Ducerre is here, and he is the director of our Office of Career and Professional Development, who is also here to, and if you went to the University of Redlands, you can make use of the Office of Career and Professional Development as an alum, so don't be shy. Uh, uh, Jim has done an amazing job of really including the students who are working in professional programs who may be mid-career and working on career shifts. So please reach out. He dropped his email in the chat, and he'd love to work with you. And and the people in his office are amazing. And I just really like that his little head is on that gingerbread on the board behind him. I think that's really great.
I had to make
Uh,
it visible for you.
yeah, I know. I do enjoy that. Um, but I want to say, if you have a topic that you would like to see covered in the writing lounge, and basically anything communications related, anything career development related, just although as you can see from my t-shirt, there will be no advice about clothing or fashion, because that's just not, I can't do that. Really have to get some other people in here for that. Let me know, okay? And you can always find anything that's coming up right here. I'm dropping this in. Whoops. Remember your university, Allison. You've only worked there for 30 years. It's just redlands.edu/writing lounge, and you can see what's coming up. My contact information is there. Previous recordings are there as well. And with that, I know you all have to run. So if you have, let's see, great material, really appreciate the chat is absolutely fawning over you, Laura, and I'm kind of angry, but okay. Um, Great job, and thank you for giving up your time and preparing for this and coming in to lead this amazing session. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Much, Allison. Bye.